What is up, my bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another episode of the Can't Squat series, where we're going over squat flexibility and how you can go about fixing it simply. The first episode was on ankle flexibility, a really crucial one to get right first, so if you haven't watched that, I recommend checking that one out. Today we're going to be taking a look at the hips, and in particular how to stop that kind of butt wink, butt folding under in the squat at the bottom, and how you can go about fixing it. So let's jump straight into the nitty gritty. In terms of an assessment for the hips, it's a lot more complicated than the ankles. I recommend you check out the previous video and make sure your ankles aren't screwed up and aren't limited, because that's going to affect the rest of it. So make sure your ankles are good first. Even if you just passed the test in the previous video, you probably want to pass it pretty easily if we're going to be working on getting a badass squat. But instead, I just want to focus on a very simple thing of filming your own squat and just taking a look at it. What we're looking for here is to look at the hips initiating the movement, them sitting back, maintaining a nice neutral spine all the way down just below parallel. And if we're going into a full resting squat, then you're going to expect some sort of rounding at the back, at the bottom, and that's absolutely fine. However, if you notice that your back starts rounding early, your knees are shooting forward, all these different compensations, then maybe we need to start working on how we use our hips in the squat and how we can improve our hip mobility so we can get in that nice deep squat. For the soft tissue work, we're going to be looking at a simple piriformis posterior glute capsule smash with a lacrosse ball. Basically, you're gonna need a lacrosse ball, you can use a tennis ball, you can use a peanut, kind of spherical object that is kind of hard. If it's too hard, it's gonna be too painful. Find a hardness of the object that's gonna work for you. But all we're gonna do is we're gonna grab that object, so we're gonna put it on the ground, we're gonna get our leg, we're gonna fold it, externally rotate it, we're gonna put the shin on the supporting leg, put our hands behind us, we're just gonna sit onto that object, and then basically stay there for the next 2 to 3 minutes. All we're going to do, we can move around while we're on that object, find what area of that posterior hip capsule is tight. Once you find some of those triggers, some of those tight points, you can just sit on that point for 30 seconds or so, see if it subsides a bit, move around, find the next one, and yeah, just spend 2 to 3 minutes doing that per side. And that's basically it. And if it doesn't feel particularly sore or particularly painful, then maybe this isn't a restriction and you don't need to do it. After we've done that soft tissue work, we can move on to some stretching for the hips, and the most incredible bang for the buck exercise is going to be the 90-90 stretch, and we're going to chuck some PNF in there for good measure. The 90-90, we're going to sit in a 90-90 position, so this means the front leg goes out straight in front of you, bent knee to 90 degrees, so it's in external rotation in front of you. Second leg goes out of your body at 90 degrees, knee is bent to 90, so it's pointing straight back at you, and that is kind of your 90-90 position. What we're going to do here is we're going to perform most of the PNF on the front legs. One hand to the side, one hand on the other foot, and we're going to lean as far over as we can over that front leg, trying to drive our belly button over the front knee. When we're leaning over, we want to think about hinging at the hips and maintaining a relatively neutral spine, or as close to it as we can. We don't want to just fold over round the back, because that doesn't get the stretch as effectively as we could. So make sure you're hinging at the hips, go as far as you can into the stretch. Once you can't go any further, we're going to perform a bit of PNF. And to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to think about driving the knee and the foot of our front leg into the ground. It's going to help activate that glute. And then basically we're going to hold that position, we're going to contract it for 5 seconds. We're then going to breathe out, relax, and we're going to shift ourselves, and we're going to try and hinge deeper into the stretch. Hold that relaxed position, now in the deeper position, for 5 seconds, and we're going to go back and forth from the contract and the relax, repeating for 5 repetitions. After we perform that on one side, what we're going to do is we're going to swivel over, and we're going to perform it on the opposite leg. So the opposite leg is going to go in front, and we're going to perform the exact same thing over that front leg, PNF, 5 repetitions. After we've done both sides, stay in that 90-90 position. You're going to return to the middle, put your arms behind you, bring your legs in a little bit closer, and then we can just perform some hip swivels. To do this, we're going to basically drop both knees to one side. So one leg goes into external rotation, one leg goes into internal rotation, and then we're going to swivel backwards and forwards between the sides. And then just try to work to drop your knees both times a little bit deeper into that side. You might find that you can't touch the floor, that's fine, but ideally we're just going to touch those knees on both sides of the floor, which is basically going to dynamically use the range that we've just tried to develop. The reason this stretch is so good is that it develops both external and internal rotation at the same time. So it's just a great bang for your buck. Whilst we need external rotation to squat, if we also have limited internal rotation, it's actually going to screw with our squat mechanics and how well we can activate certain muscles, which is then going to play with our squat, especially if we're going for a deep squat. So by getting both here, we're going to hopefully fix that. This exercise is going to vary on tightness depending on who it is, but there's probably a good chance you're relatively tight here. So if you're particularly tight, 2 to 3 sets per side works pretty well. Maybe you can do 1 to 2 sets if you're not feeling it so much, but you definitely want to do a decent amount of time spent in this position. After we've done that soft tissue work, after we've done that stretching, I'm going to recommend the squat rocks. Initially, we're going to be working it on the floor, and then hopefully eventually we're going to be working it in a squat position. This exercise is going to help teach you how to hinge at the hips. There's often one of the causes for that butt wink, those hips tucking under. So you're going to get a stretch here, but it's also about understanding how to articulate your hips. For this exercise, you're going to start in a squat position, squat down as far as you can. You're then going to help yourself get down onto your knees, so you're in a kneeling position with the feet flexed, and you're then going to move forward again onto your elbows. We're basically going to rock backwards and forwards. To start this movement, what you're thinking about doing is drawing your belly button into your stomach and activating your TVA, or transverse abdominis, and then all you're going to do is you're going to push your hips backwards whilst maintaining a neutral spine. You're going to push your hips back as far as you can, and what you're essentially going to do is think about twerking. You're going to try to think about trying to really emphasize all of that movement coming from the hips, hinging, and that lower back should be remaining neutral or even into a slight bit of extension. So here you're probably going to feel a little bit of stretching into the hamstrings, into those adductors. That's great, that's what we're after, but we're also want to make sure that you're thinking about consciously keeping that spine neutral and passive whilst the hips do all the work. So we're going to do it for about 10 to 15 repetitions, and we're going to pause for 3 seconds in that bottom position when we rock back, and really try to think about pushing back as far as we can whilst hinging at the hips and stretching out those adductors. If you want to take this up a notch in that bottom position, what you can think about doing is trying to activate your hip flexors to pull yourself down deeper and twist those hips. But this takes a little bit more muscular awareness. Once you're starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with the floor position squat rocks, we can do this in a squat position using a assistant point in front of us to help us articulate our squat. So what you're going to do, get a pole, get something in front of you, one hand above, one hand below, drop down into your squat, and then we're going to start in a relaxed squat position. So this is fine, having that butt tucked under, having it rounded back. Just go down as far as you can. And then what you're going to think about doing is using that assistance, you're just going to kind of lift yourself up and then twist your hips round into a nice neutral back position, into the lowest squat you can do, pushing the knees out, twisting the back down. So that would be like kind of our bottom squat position. You're going to hold it for a few seconds, and then you go back into that relaxed squat position a bit deeper. And then you can alternate back and forwards between those two for, again, 10 to 15 repetitions with a pause in each rep. And that's basically it. This is an exercise, isn't the most intense stretch in the world, but what it is going to do, it's going to help teach you how to move your hips and fix that butt wink, and also give you a stretch at the same time. And if you combine it with the other 2 exercises as well beforehand, it really is pretty effective. You can repeat this final exercise for anywhere between 2 to 4 sets. I think this routine works great as a warm-up for your squat sessions, but you can throw it in as a mobility session in between as well. What you want to be doing is just making sure you're doing it 2-3 times a week. And the one I'm going to recommend today is a front foot elevated split squat. This exercise is absolutely gold for developing hip range of motion and strengthening it at the same time. It is a unilateral, which means it's a single leg movement. And we're basically going to start in a split stance position with our front foot elevated. And all we're going to do here is we're going to sink down onto that front foot, driving that knee over our front foot as we can, keeping it in a good line. We don't want to let the knee drop in. We don't want to let the hips go out. We just want to keep those hips nice and neutral, drive that knee straight forward. We go down as far as we can, and we just push back up off that front foot. If your ankles are tight, it means you can't go as far forward over that front foot. That's fine. It's also going to help develop ankle flexibility. If you can't go down enough because you haven't got the flexibility in your adductors, hamstrings, go down as far as you can, but this is also going to help strengthen and develop flexibility there as well. Because we're doing this with our second leg back and extension, there's no way we can butt wink in this position. It's just going to help develop that range, and it's going to help install a better movement pattern for squatting. So that's basically it. You can do this unweighted. You can do this adding weight as well, with some dumbbells or even a barbell on your back. It's a fantastic strengthening exercise that's going to help improve your hip positioning in a squat. And that's basically it. That is kind of the flexibility routine, and then a great integration exercise as well to chuck into your training. If you want to get the full details about this routine or any links to anything, it's all in the description down below, especially that previous video as well. There's also going to be one more episode to come on fixing your squat, so make sure you don't miss that. That will also be linked in the description down below. While you're down there, why not leave a comment? Why not join the conversation? Let me know what you thought of this episode. Let me know if you're enjoying the series or if you have any questions. You can also hit that thumbs up button, support the channel, show you're enjoying this series. Right next to it is also that subscribe button if you want to join the Bodyweight Warrior tribe so you don't miss out on any more of these future videos on flexibility, on bodyweight training, on handstands, all of that good stuff. But that has been it for this week, guys. I'll catch you in the next episode. Have a strong week and peace.